Thank you, Lisa. This is the last session before lunch. It's a really important topic, and it's basically how AI is impacting the future of work. Jaime Teevan is Microsoft's chief scientist. We've been talking about having her speak here for several years, and we finally aligned schedules to be able to make this happen. I interviewed Jaime a few years ago, and she told me, my job is always sort of like, what's next? So we're going to focus on what's next for work. Jaime played a lead role in the creation of Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is bringing AI in, and she's been driving research-backed innovation across Microsoft's core productivity products. She was technical advisor to CEO Satya Nadella previously and led Microsoft's Future of Work initiative during the pandemic, where she brought together lots of people to try and understand what was going on. She's published over 100 papers on human-computer interaction and other topics. And I continue to think about things that Jaime and I spoke about almost 2 years ago, including her thinking about how people should lead like a scientist and what makes a conversation useful. I don't think I've ever had a discussion with someone before about the topic, what makes a conversation useful to you. Jacob Clemente, my colleague, interviewed Jaime last year. She said she couldn't stop thinking about how AI will enable large-scale collaboration. So we're going to get an update on that, among other topics. Jaime, thank you for joining us. So at the highest level, just at a very, very high level, what do you think are the biggest changes to the ways that we work that are still to come as a result of AI?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, because we're in the infancy of the changes that are yet to come. And I don't mean that as a threat, because I know it's been a lot of change going on thus far. We've actually, you mentioned how I did work on the rapid shift to remote work and understanding remote and hybrid work. It feels like we're in the middle of a bunch of changes right after, one after another. They're actually part of the same transition. And we're still just in the early innings. Like that shift to the cloud was part of the transition. That's what created the infrastructure and that has enabled AI. The shift to remote work created new surfaces, created new data, which enabled a lot of the scaled learning that's happening with AI right now. And then I would say right now we're in maybe the individual using AI for productivity phase. And you mentioned a little about scaled collaboration and how organizations change. I think that's coming in a little bit. Right now we have the real basics of what it means to use AI in a collaborative context kind of ahead of us.
So let's just go right at that. So you've been thinking a lot about collaboration, and as you said, if I use an AI tool today, I sort of sit at my computer, I use ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot, and it's a pretty individual thing. It actually doesn't reflect the collaborative nature of work. Is that going to change, and how quickly?
I mean, it has to change. It is. I mean, all work is collaborative, right? That is everything we do. Even when you're working alone to write a document, that is to communicate something to somebody. All work is collaborative. So it has to change. Actually, when we study how people are using Copilot, you see pretty big changes to individual work, because that's also the easiest to measure early on. So we see people, for example, with Copilot are creating 10% more documents, or they're reading 11% fewer emails. But the shift with AI is not just about us writing more emails for other people to use AI to summarize. There's a real fundamental actually, I don't know if anybody read the HBR article by Jeff Hancock and others. It was just out recently. AI slop is kind of all the rage at the moment, and this article's about.
Are people blaming you for that?
They shouldn't blame me.
You brought AI into.
No, I mean, we're all to blame for it is our work practices and the things we do and the way we use the tools are available. Blame me, blame yourself. We should all take responsibility.
Great. We'll blame ourselves.
No, but so AI slop is it's a super real problem, right? Yeah. I think about this. I use Copilot. I'll be thinking through something and I'll say, take all of the documents that I've written about the future of work and pull them together and write something for me, and I won't have time to review it. And so even not sharing that with other people, I'll just go save a document with whatever the AI produced, and then all of a sudden that becomes part of my grounding materials. It becomes truth. in my corpus to reuse in future interactions. And like, that's sloppy. And so like the whole concept behind work slop is essentially why using AI for individual productivity in like a sloppy manner creates mess for other people because we aren't centering the fact that work is collaborative. You know, it's essentially transferring the work of
to someone else.
Yes, from the creator to the receiver.
And so how do you fix that?
Well, there's all sorts of ways. I mean, and that's why we're doing research in that space.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of ways. I think one of the real ones is thinking about knowledge and what we're doing. You know, right now we're very artifact focused. You know, how many beautiful documents and presentations do I create to share? And we need to increasingly be knowledge focused. You saw this show up a lot early on, actually with programming work, where you're like, ooh, let's measure programmer output by the number of lines of code that they write. And that's a ridiculous thing to do because then you get programmers writing lots of code, and that's not that useful.
And you have consultants and others who are making endless PowerPoint
presentations, and really we need to center on the knowledge. And like, actually, this is related to a conversation we had about conversations. Like, essentially, interesting work in the future is about generating knowledge.
Yeah.
And so that's about having fun conversations. It's about attending events like this. It's about reading random things or drawing unexpected connections. Like that's the future of work.
Yeah. So that has implications for a bunch of things. So there's this idea of collaboration. Like, could you imagine AI enabling collaboration on the scale of this event, for example, where there's like so many important bits of knowledge and thoughts that exist among all of us, if there is a way to do that. And then the other area you just touched on is documents. So in a way, you can think of documents as being vestiges of like literal like paper, and then that became a Word document, but it didn't fundamentally change the way we think about formatting. So what's the future of documents, and what's the future of how we work together?
Yeah, I mean, your question is everything, which is great. You know, it is, we're creating new knowledge. This is why I love being a scientist, essentially, like science being the center of things right now, is that we are creating new knowledge. And that new knowledge gets captured in ways, we have been capturing it in documents.
Yeah.
We're now capturing it also in the weights of a language model. We're capturing it in increasingly in the chat conversations that we have with a language model, or the transcripts from the conversations that we have with people. And exactly as you were saying, that is different. Like, we generate, like, our human brains are kind of designed to operate at small scale. There's sort of a reason that the perfect size dinner party is 8 people.
Yeah.
You know,
and Dunbar's number is 150 people.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a reason. That's because that's what helps us produce well. That doesn't mean that's how knowledge needs to be restricted to being created. You know, all of you right now are having interesting thoughts and interesting perspectives, and that ability, because we can now capture thoughts in natural language and integrate them, that ability to, you know, get the collective insight from this room is a really awesome. I mean, imagine this with your organization, for example. Imagine how you set your priorities. So right now, you may be like, okay, these are our priorities for the quarter. They're A, B, and C. Imagine being able to actually ask everybody in your organization what they're working on, and then see practically, and you can do this, like, you can actually ask people what their priorities are, use AI to integrate that, and then you know what your organization is working on. And then you can say, oh, does that make sense? Is that aligned with my priorities or not? And then you can actually start fanning that back out and having that sort of back and forth. It's a totally different way that organizations can function. I mean, and this is just this is the example of, like, right now we're writing more emails and reading more documents, and like, there's so much foundational change that's coming.
Yeah. And in terms of the experience of actually using, to bring AI back into it specifically, there's so much this user experience where I'm just focused on my screen and I'm interacting with an AI. Like, how does that, are we going to be prompting AI tools simultaneously more in the way that we might work on a document simultaneously or things like that? Is that part of, that's sort of a logical direction from what you're saying?
Good. This is a great question. And like, so there's two pieces. There's one is like actually the model's going to change, and then the other is actually the model with which we operate and work with the AI. And those are both really interesting. Right now models are actually trained primarily for individual interaction. You've probably heard of this concept of like instruction tuning. You're training a model to take an input from an individual and come up with the best response for that. That means models work well in answering your questions and don't necessarily work well right now in group contexts. There's some collaborative data in the training sets used for most foundation models, but it'll be things like congressional transcripts. And congressional transcripts don't necessarily sound like a work meeting or something you're doing with someone.
They're not the right model.
They're not the right model. Yeah. So there's a lot of work to be done to actually think about what it means to create a model that works well in collaborative context.
So that's the sort of back-end
That's the back-end foundational. And then there's the side of what does it mean as humans for us? Like you're like, oh, I know how to sit down. I mean, and dude, you didn't know how to do this 5 years ago. Like, but now you know how to sit down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're like, well, I want to ground the model and I have to come up with a meta prompt and you have these concepts. We are likewise going to come up with the concepts for working with groups. And largely what's interesting and like and actually this is the reason, like this is not a technology problem. This is like a human problem, a leadership problem, a business problem is what does it mean to work together in a way that provides the right information to the model and evaluates the content that's coming out. So it's metacognitive work. We sort of have to like up-level the way that we're thinking about things and like what does it mean for us to, I talked about how models are instruction tuned and designed to respond to an instruction. Actually, the work of a group working together becomes how do we define our goal? Yeah. And what we want to discover. And then it becomes like, how do we plan and think about that? How do we provide judgment and discern what is relevant and like take that and implement it? Those are really cool, inherently deeply collaborative activities actually that we're kind of doing by ourselves.
That's really interesting. There's one, I think Jacob was reporting on a group of researchers, I think, who part of what they do is they write white papers, basically. And they used to sort of, someone would draft it, and then someone would comment, and they'd go back and forth. And what they started doing, actually, was just gathering and talking about what they wanted the white paper to say, and they would have the AI tool listen to them, and then actually write the draft based on their back and forth conversation, which is probably a pretty like primitive example of what you're saying, but it's where my mind goes. Yeah. It's
exactly
example.
Right. And actually, it's one of the ways that we're seeing people use Teams, Copilot and Teams, is that people are intentionally having meetings rather than saying like, okay, we have a document to write. You go write the introduction and I'll go fill out some of the key. I'm like going towards scientific documents. I'm like, I'll write the related work. But what we're seeing is actually people get on calls and have a conversation and use that to produce. And then it becomes really exciting to start thinking about like, how do you help people have better conversations? How do you identify the knowledge gap? So like the work of a conversation.
Yeah. This goes back to the topic I mentioned at the beginning.
Yes.
What makes a conversation useful?
Right. Yeah. And the work of a conversation, and it's no accident that we call pulling a bunch of content into a language model to provide context. We call that grounding. And we call that grounding because it actually comes from the concept of how humans communicate. And what we're doing is grounding. And like this conversation has been us grounding. And so like the process of creating knowledge is the process of grounding and then coming up with new ideas. And then it is that grounded content. It's what you actually produce. It's sort of durable that you're going to build on. And so like thinking about what does it mean? How do you support better grounding? How do you help a person get up to speed? How do you close gaps in understanding? Where I'm like, oh, you used a term that I didn't understand or talked about. It's actually another way that I really like using Copilot is specifically somebody will say something in a meeting that I'm like, I think that was clever, but I'm not sure I really get it. And you can ask the language model to rephrase what that was, and it actually like can help translate it into something that I understand well in real time that then allows me to like respond.
And just to stay on that, are there specific practices in a conversation? So if I'm having conversations and I want them to be maximally useful, are there specific practices that you'd recommend I employ?
Yeah. Generally, I think the best practice for all of us in pretty much every context right now is to up-level sort of, this is, you know, we've chatted about this before, but like kind of do the metacognitive work and up-level, whatever level you're operating, go to one level higher. So if you're like ask the model, we've just been having a conversation, what is the most useful thing for us to talk about next?
Okay.
So in general, it's sort of, the model is actually quite good at capturing. We sometimes think about using language models like deterministic systems because that's what we're used to with computers. And I think leaning into that, that non-determinism, the stochastic nature, and sort of thinking about how should I structure this differently, or how should I be using this differently?
Okay, and in plain language, that's just basically asking for advice from the model, or
yeah, it's the same question. It's if you're like, I don't know how to do this. Externalize that.
Okay.
And it's useful for me too. Like, you know, when we're having a conversation, you're externalizing. It benefits humans as well. So.
I'm trying. There's so many ideas here that, going back to some sort of fundamental questions I think we have is like so your job is to sort of figure out what's next, and in what's next and what's next beyond that, what are the most valuable things for us as humans to be focused on? And this is a question I think for ourselves personally, for a lot of our kids, like what should we try and bring to our work and work on building our skills out in and getting experience? Like, as you look forward, what would your advice be?
Yeah, I mean, and I have 4 college-aged sons, so this is something I think about a lot.
Issue.
However, none of them listen to my advice.
Well, here's your chance to have other people.
You know, I think it's really useful. Well, so first of all, I will say, this is a terrifying, we started out talking about how we've been through all this change. It's tiring, exhausting, it's terrifying, but it's also super exciting.
Yeah.
And we are creating the future. And so I enjoy watching my kids play around with that. You actually see senior leadership is more interested right now in hiring people with AI expertise compared with any other experience. So I try and tell my kids that, if nothing else. I'm like, go create the space to play around and learn things. And I think that applies for all of us, like taking that space. You know, things are moving so fast. I actually saw this for myself too. I'm a science leader. I you know, drive a lot of science work. And there's so much, you know, all this, like, what does it mean to train a model for collaborative context? Like, such a huge, exciting opportunity. And like really pushing that work fast. And I was just last week actually sat down and was like, oh my gosh, we're all so panicked about, and not like in a negative way, like in a fun, exciting, but still also like you don't sleep at night kind of way, about moving fast and making this happen. And we weren't actually creating the space. This actually even goes back to the metacognitive bit. Like we weren't creating the space to think deeply about what needs to happen. And so like I was missing some of the important feedback loops that we needed to be building into the system because we were in such a race. And so I think creating that space is really important for all of us right now.
And what humans bring are this metacognitive dimension. A lot of the folks here have to make decisions in a period of actually great uncertainty around labor and different pressure about people strategy. Do you have any advice for them as folks are looking out to 2026, how you would think about skills and staffing and just kind of all of those people questions?
Yeah, it's a good question, and the answer we partly need to spend a lot of time being curious and learning because that answer is going to change regularly. I mean, and it's been shocking even just to see with our customers and when I chat with them how much perspective has changed regularly. I guess one thing that I would encourage people to do is think about how AI is different from humans, because I think that's where you're going to get. So like we spend a lot of time being like, oh, how are humans different from the model?
Yeah.
But it's worth thinking about also how the model is different from humans, because it sort of helps us get into what opportunities there are to unlock. The collective intelligence example that we were just talking about, the fact that models that humans can only think about 8 people, have a conversation with 8 people, but like a model could have a conversation with every single person in this room right now and kind of interview all of us and create something. That is different. Something else that's quite different, actually, you can't hold a model accountable. And that matters. Actually, one of my kids, who's a sophomore in college right now, is really into accounting. And I was talking to somebody, and he's like, "Accounting, that's a job that's going away." And I'm like, "No, actually, accounting is all about bearing accountability for things. Like his job is to figure out and verify that things are true
And certify.
And like be responsible.
It's actually
for
a high growth profession.
Oh, well, good idea.
Yeah,
That's good to know. Good
for your
Dylan
son,
on that.
Yeah.
So I think leaning into those. Actually, another thing that's interesting that a model can do is you can wipe its memory and start over again. So it's quite interesting to like imagine. I can't sit down right now. I can't be like, oh my gosh, this whole conversation, we screwed up, didn't land any of the points I wanted to land, and like start all over again. But with AI, you can actually do that. And like that ability to sort of role play or try out different things is really interesting. So it's like, I think, as much as it's nice to think about AI as a human, like, so there's sort of we have the metaphor of AI as a computer and a sort of deterministic thing. And we need to break out of that. And so like to break out of that, we've tried the metaphor of using AI like a human. And like that's a useful like start. A useful crutch when
People say it's like an intern or a junior employee.
Correct.
Sort of thing,
But like honestly, we're past that. It's been long enough that we should now be more sophisticated in the metaphors we use for AI and start thinking about why it's not like a human and what is different. And that's going to be how we can figure out how we lean into our organizations and our organizational
Is there a new
structure.
metaphor you favor?
I can't figure it out. Tell
Okay,
me. You figure
right.
it out and tell me.
Okay, we'll come back and ask you next year.
Okay.
Jaime Teevan, the Chief Scientist at Microsoft, thank you so much for that
It's a pleasure.
conversation.